You guys, I'm afraid to show my face because this video is being uploaded so late before the full moon. Hello, friends. It's your girl, Alina. In this video, we're going to be talking about all things this Taurus full moon astrology forecast. I'm going to be doing an all signs reading for all 12 zodiac signs for your sun, moon, and or rising sign. You can listen to just one of the readings or all of them. If you're like me, and maybe you were experiencing a little stagnation, I don't know, let's say overwhelm, dare I say a little burnout. This Taurus full moon will actually be a really great reprieve for many of us. And I say that for a few reasons. One of them is that the moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. And that essentially means in astrology that it's expressing itself a lot more clearly. Any sort of potential challenges or hiccups that might happen under this full moon, it essentially presents a higher likelihood that you come out of it exalted, that you come out of it better off, either from learning a lesson or you're able to fix something or improve upon it even better than before that hiccup occurred. The full moon is in the sign of Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus rules Libra and it's in Libra. So the two major planets that are at play under this full moon, that are the most relevant, being the moon and Venus, they are both in very complementary signs, which for Venus, that means that it's also expressing itself very clearly. And Venus is one of the luckiest planets in our solar system. So we have this very lucky benefic planet ruling over this full moon. And Taurus is one of the most grounding zodiac signs for the moon to be in. The moon rules over our emotions and our intuitive abilities. This lunation is definitely signifying a period of time where if we choose to focus on this, if we choose to really work with it, we can find a bit more grounding. We can find a bit more clarity and centeredness. It emits, for some of us, maybe a bit of chaos, but that's the gist, and we're going to dive into all of it together. And before we dive in, I'm super excited to mention to you a few quick rapid fire updates. For one, what did you wear for Halloween? I want to know. I personally dressed up as Stack from Sinners. Here's a picture. And I had 2 great Halloween weekend outings with my husband. Another rapid fire update is that when I launched the planners, I didn't have a picture for the amethyst spiral planners, and y'all quite nearly sold them out anyway. But I finally have pictures for them. And drumroll, please. These are the Amethyst Spiral Astrology Planners for 2026. This is what it looks like on the outside. There is a custom tab. So for the symbols key page, if you see a symbol throughout the planner, you can easily go to that tab. We're doing a lot of bundle deals right now where you can get up to 20% off when you bundle a physical calendar with a digital. And if you want any context around what is a digital calendar, like how does that apply to me? It is revolutionary and it's custom to your rising sign. So you get notifications custom to your rising sign. Okay, you supported content. But with all of that said, let's go ahead and dive into, back up a little bit. Full moons in general, I like to call them this cosmic spotlight because full moons happen midway through the lunar cycle. They happen after about 2 weeks since the new moon. And before that, the light was building on the surface of the moon, building momentum, sort of maybe even building a bit of tension. And the moon is seen as something that can tangibly impact us. It's in astrology, it's seen to rule over our emotional and intuitive abilities. And just as the moon can raise the tides, so too can it raise our emotional and intuitive abilities around this time of the month and the lunar cycle. And so this is why you see many people doing full moon and new moon rituals, where around the time of a full moon, they pause to kind of observe what's going on in their lives. Notice what is being spotlighted as a culmination. So what's something on one side of the coin, what can we celebrate right now? What's something maybe that has been reflected in your life that has maybe spotlighted how far you've come in some area of your life? Because again, it's this midway in the lunar cycle. It's seen as this energetic peak. What's something that's sort of matured or peaked in your life in a big or small way? This is a great time to celebrate. And on the other side of the coin, during the full moon, it's seen as a great time to release anything that's not around the full moon. It's very strongly associated with reaping what we have sown, for better or worse, right? For better, we can celebrate something, how far we've come. But for worse, maybe we have reaped what we have sown. We are looking at what we have gathered, the fruits of our labor, and maybe we're seeing, oh, I don't fully like this. Maybe we're doing a vibe check and we're realizing, oh, I don't feel super aligned in this area, whatever it is, big or small. Full moons are a great opportunity to do full moon rituals or journaling where you just get grounded and you get clear on anything that you're ready to let go of, maybe tangible steps that you can take for the next few weeks, for the rest of this lunar cycle, to let go of those things. And as you see the light on the surface of the moon wax all and just essentially dwindle all the way down to the new moon, where there's no more of the sun's light being reflected, virtually invisible, so too can the energetic ties between you and the thing that you're wishing to release also wane along with it, also dwindle and go away. And that is why I'm so proud to say that in all R-Line astrology planners, there are dedicated full moon journaling sections for every single month of the entire year of 2026. Journaling, and especially in this day and age with so much distraction everywhere on social media and like our phones, it can be so powerful to reconnect with ourselves, get back to the moment and get grounded in that way, especially when it's enough. I digress. But moving on from there, considering that this is a full moon in the sign of Taurus and it's at 13 degrees, these are all things that are signifying these overarching themes of focusing on what leaves you feeling grounded, what leaves you feeling a bit more centered, what leaves you feeling like when you're walking around, you know, I took care of me. I poured into myself, so now I can pour into others in some way. You know, it doesn't necessarily need to be this super extravagant thing of like, I'm going to run myself a bath and I'm going to do this and get myself a massage and do, like, it can literally be journaling. It can literally be, you know what, I have never come back from a walk in the afternoon and not felt a little bit more grounded and present. You know, like it's those type of things. So that's the overarching theme for this Taurus full moon. And like I said before, because we have Venus, the benefic planet that literally is ruling over this full moon, it's in Libra, it's in its domicile, it's clearly expressing its lucky energy for us under this full moon. The moon is exalted in Taurus. This is really indicating, and this full moon, I believe, is a super full moon. And super full moons, if you ever hear that phrase, it's essentially to describe that the moon is in one of its closest proximities to the earth. All right, but moving on from that, one last thing I want to mention is that if you want an entire write-up of my YouTube videos directly emailed to you right before every full and new moon, then you should definitely, that I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about one main top transit, and that is that the day before this full moon, Mars in Sagittarius will be forming an opposition with Uranus, which is currently in Gemini. Now, this is a pretty notable transit that will be felt throughout a good portion of this month. It's not necessarily considered a very constructive or positive transit. And I say that because Mars is one of the two major malefic planets in our solar system. It's considered a planet that is usually more strongly associated with anger, frustration. It's considered, you know, in traditional astrology, the planet of war. But on the other side of the coin, it's also considered the planet of passion, drive, action, and energy. It's associated with being the planet in our chart, whether it's transiting and interacting with our natal chart or in our own chart. It's this planet that's associated with where you might have a lot more drive or energy or passion in your life, and that can be very constructive. But it's in an opposition aspect with Uranus, and Uranus is a planet of unexpected shifts and changes, and it's currently in Gemini, which is the sign of information exchange. It's really the sign of the internet in a lot of ways, technology, conversation as well. And so Mars, a planet of like drive, passion, but also anger, is in this sort of like head-to-head opposition with Uranus, a planet of sudden changes. So this can, around the time of this full moon, there can be this sort of undercurrent of restlessness, or for some of us feeling this sort of like frustration or like this call to rebel, kind of feeling like, oh, the status quo, or oh, the way that things are done at my job or at home, or like the way that I've been doing things, like I just want to just do something different. There can be this sort of tension there, and that opposition is what's that, if you notice that they're coming up. But with that said, let's go ahead and dive into this all signs forecast. What I will do is I'm going to be giving a sort of quick reading for all 12 zodiac signs, what to expect for this lunation, what house it'll be transiting in your natal chart based off of your rising sign, if you want to listen to your rising sign reading. But if you want to listen to your a reading for your sun sign. That's more of a reading about how you might respond to any experiences that you will have around the time of this full moon from a more like identity focused lens, like how you identify with the experiences. And if you want to go to your moon sign reading, you can, that reading is more so reflective of how you might emotionally react or feel around the time of this full moon. These cyclists going by. I like to encourage people to, especially if you have a pretty notable stellium in your chart, you have a lot of planets in one sign in your natal chart, it doesn't hurt to look at that or listen to that reading as well. Like I have a stellium that's in a different sign than my rising sign. And sometimes that reading is a lot more notable. And, so yeah, there's way more nuance, but I'm going to stop there. But I will see you at that reading. And then after that are the journal prompt questions. Hello to my Aries friends. So for my Aries rising, this lunation will be happening in your second house of personal finance, personal income, but also self-worth and self-love and the means that you need in order to live your life. So think about like, in order for me to get to work my job, I need a car. That's a tangible physical object that is a means to an end. What is that? The tangible physical objects that are a means to an end for you. And that end being what you need in order to live your life. And so what does that mean? So this full moon will be it's definitely indicating a few days leading up to or following it, some experiences that are tied back to or spotlighting your income, the money that you make, that you personally earn, and something having to do with your relationship with income, but also your relationship with the tangible things around you. I think for some of you, you might have some conversations or reflections on maybe spending habits, especially going into the holiday season. But with this being in the sign of Taurus, I definitely think that there's going to be a really heavy emphasis on income specifically and self-love. Now, oh my gosh, y'all, I'm by a window. I'm sorry, I get distracted. The two people just rode by on like a tandem bicycle, but it's not a normal bicycle. And they have like a huge flag. They look so cool. Anyway, but all of that to say, this can signify a culmination on how you maybe have been showing up, or also even or a culmination on how you have, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It could signify a full moon sort of culmination and spotlight on how you've been building or potentially even overextending yourself as it pertains to money, your work-life balance, and any sort of like value shifts. You also might have some noticeable or notable conversations that involve value systems and what matters most to you. What comes to mind is, I feel like some of you guys might be considering moving or making like a pretty major financial decision, whether it's, involving buying a new car or changing careers or something like that. But it's ultimately tied back to income, spending, budgeting, your relationship with those things. And this can be a really great time to reflect on those things. And what comes to mind is, sometimes, especially if you're in the West, it can be so easy to either consciously or subconsciously want to keep up with the Joneses. I don't know who this reading is for, obviously, Aries rising, but I don't know. I just feel called to mention that it can be really powerful to pause and ask yourself, okay, these are what my values are. This is what I want. And ask yourself honestly, how much of this involves wanting to look good online or to friends or how other people will perceive you, and how much of this is aligned with your deepest rooted values and what you want out of your life. And I think that for many, many people, especially in the West, but just in general, we can consciously and unconsciously be influenced by the things that we see, especially online, to want certain things for the aesthetics. And, second house also tied to aesthetics as well, Venus being involved with Taurus, but not always fully tied back to what would actually leave us feeling grounded and present in our lives, and sometimes that can mean getting a really beautiful used car versus brand new, just to kind of say that we had brand new. And through having that used car, there's way less destabilizing financial pressure, by living within our means even more so than we thought before. I don't know. This feels like, just whoever that was for, comment below if that resonated with you, but that's my reading for you, my Aries friends. Now for my Taurus friends, this full moon is all about you. It's in your first house of self-identity, self-image, new beginnings, initiating new things, and your physical body and your physical health. And so this can be a very deeply personal time for you, my Taurus friends. It can be a really great time for reflecting on these overarching full moon themes, of course, of like what you want to let go of, release, or what you want to celebrate in terms of what has and hasn't been stabilizing you in your life, leaving you feeling grounded and present. And, you know, I was talking with my Aries reading about how much more grounding it can be to live within your means, because their reading was for their second house, a lot having to do with finances. And for you, this can be this culmination on how you've been showing up and caring for your body or asserting your needs and your boundaries. You know, with you guys having the power of being a fixed sign on one side of the coin, I'm sure you've heard the cliche, being a fixed sign, that can be reflective of being stubborn. But on the other side of the coin, that can be reflective of being really committed to something. And when you set your mind to something, and after you build a little bit of momentum, you can stick with it really well. And that's something that it wouldn't hurt to lean into right now, my Taurus friends. But around this time, you might have experiences where there's these mirrors being held up to you. And reflecting back, oh, like I didn't realize this about myself, or I didn't realize that I actually wanted that. And you could be seeing yourself more clearly around this time, a few days leading up to a few days following this lunation. But you can also consider releasing old identities or old expectations that no longer fit you. It can be this moment of grounded self-renewal, of recalibration that's more in alignment of who you are and like your more inherent characteristics and strengths versus maybe trying to be something that you aren't, you know, like there's a fine line, I think, between that productive sort of like delusion of like, I'm going to do this and I'm delusional and I'm like, nobody can stop me. That's very productive. Right. But there's a fine line between that and trying to like be somebody else. And what I mean by that is there's a very big difference between visualizing you as your highest self, custom to who you are. Like, what does it look like for you uniquely to evolve into your higher self versus being online and constantly comparing yourself and constantly trying to look like and be like somebody else. What comes to mind for some of you, my Taurus rising friends, is, I'm going to tell a really quick story. Long story short, I used to be on social media constantly comparing myself to certain people, and I would follow them all the time, and I would think about them all the time, and I'd think like, they wouldn't do this. They don't have to deal with that. They would never stoop this low. And like constantly just like almost like giving this energy to somebody else. And it was so powerful for me to unfollow them or mute them, because I literally, all that energy that I was giving out, it ended up going back to myself. And it's very unhealthy in this day and age to have that sort of social media dynamic. It's really detrimental in the psyche. And you would be so surprised how much you can grow and how rapidly when you are not allowing your energy to be siphoned off to other people. And I don't know who needed to hear that, but that is my reading for you, my Taurus friends. This is a beautiful opportunity for releasing anything that no longer serves you, but also taking a step in alignment with more clear intentions that make you feel a little bit more grounded in who you are, where you can continue to strive, but having it be more so in alignment with who you are and who you know yourself to be already, and letting that be a more evolved version of who you are versus somebody completely different. Now, for my Gemini friends, this lunation will be happening in your 12th house of endings, of imagination, of blurred boundaries, of, the 12th house is considered sort of like this house of the sabbatical, of self-isolation, of the benefits of drawing your energy back to yourself. And in alignment with these Taurus themes, getting grounded, the benefits of getting present and grounded in the moment, and just allowing downloads to come through, ideas to come through, and connecting the dots with your full mental energy without it being like distracted or siphoned from other things. And around this full moon for you guys, illumination will really be coming from behind the scenes experiences. And this, in general, you might have some experiences that spotlight how powerful spiritual grounding can be right now, and how powerful letting go of any sort of mental clutter can be right now. For you, my Gemini risings, if you choose to do it, if you decide to maybe download one of those apps that makes it so you can't access all the distracting social media apps. Like if you decide to, I don't know, you're not going to pick up your phone for the first 4 hours or 2 hours in the morning. Like if you decide like, you know what, I'm not going to do that one thing where I'm really helping this person over here, but I need to take a break from it for a moment because I'm burnt out. Like whatever it is that you can sort of like cut out even temporarily in order to just be bored, just be in the moment. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but that is where you will realize that you are actually this incredible lightning rod for downloads and for incredible ideas if you pause on the distractions and constantly intaking information and allowing yourself to be and either do some deep learning or deep work where you're focusing on something intentional or not at all. But that will be really, really powerful for you, my Gemini friends, because this is happening in your 12th house. And I just really want to emphasize the power of prioritizing rest and restoration around this time, especially with this being a Taurus full moon. All about grounding, baby. Go get barefoot on some grass, man. Just sit, look at the birds while they're still out before, wintertime takes its hold on the northern hemisphere. If you're in the southern hemisphere, enjoy that summer, really get into nature. But that's my reading for you, my Gemini friends. Now for my Cancer friends, this full moon will be happening in your 11th house of social networks, community, friends, networking, and the true power and progressiveness and evolution of ideas and planning and coordination that can come from sharing your ideas and learning ideas from other people. There's so much power in that. And so for you, my Cancer friends, there will be these overarching themes a few days following and a few days leading up to this lunation that'll be all about community, friendships, and shared vision. And you might, but especially if you've been feeling any sort of stagnation in that area of life or anything like that, it wouldn't hurt for you to pause and reflect on where could that be coming from, and get clear on what can work for you, maybe something to let go of. Maybe what comes to mind for some of you, for my Cancer risings, is I feel like there's been a handful of you that have been looking for community, that have been looking for spaces where you feel a little bit more seen, where you can kind of like exist and not perform, where you can take in the energy of others that inspire you or that spark curiosity, that leave you feeling comfortable. And with this being a full moon in Taurus in your 11th house of community and friendships and connection, this could be a really great time to put yourself out there. Let yourself be seen as brightly as this full moon is. Taurus is also, Taurus is ruled by Venus, and it's also not only this sign that is all about getting grounded and also about love and aesthetics, but it's also about connection. So for some of you, if that resonated, look for meetups, go on Eventbrite, go on TikTok, go on social media, and look up community events, mixers, friendship mixers in my area. And I think you'd be surprised what you might find and what crazy sort of serendipitous magic that tends to happen when you end up putting yourself out there. I think that a lot of serendipitous magical experiences that end up being really lucky are usually sort of like, I don't know, I just feel like the higher beings, whether there are guardian angels or I don't know, like I feel like a lot of that is coordinated through the people we connect with in mysterious ways. And whoever that resonates with, that's my reading for you. Also consider releasing any sort of outdated dynamics and invest your energy into communities that feel nourishing and not draining. But even if you're like, oh, I can't get out right now, or I'm sick, or I don't really want to socialize right now, you don't necessarily have to. It can also be a great time to journal and reflect on your relationship and your association with community and with friendships and what that looks like. Has it evolved over the years? Is there something you want to celebrate in terms of how far you've come in that area of your life? That's my reading for you. Now for my Leo friends, this Taurus full moon will be happening in your 10th house of reputation, legacy, the 10th house is sort of this house of high visibility. In modern astrology, it's also associated with your career path, how people see you at your job, you know, your relationship with your career. Maybe you're doing interviews or auditions or anything like that. This is the house that it really rules over. And with there being a Taurus full moon there, especially a few days leading up to or a few days following this full moon, there definitely is there's an indication of a spotlight being more so on your career, your reputation, your long-term goals, and maybe even sort of hitting a culmination point professionally for some of you guys. And that can be a culmination on one side of the coin of like, wow, like I actually feel really grounded where I am now at this job. And looking back over the years, like I've grown so much in this space. Or on the other side of the coin, it could be a culmination of like, oh, I finally kind of see things for what they are. Now I understand how to navigate it a bit differently. This can signify a culmination for some of you where you might have really good interviews around this time. Really good first impressions and interactions where, again, going back to the 10th house being visibility, there's a view of you in a certain way where there's this sort of spotlight on you. And with this being in Taurus, it's really signifying a beautiful time where if you have been feeling like work has been a lot, it's been a little bit more chaotic, or there's been a bit more tension in that space, getting clear on what can ground you. Maybe these are things that you can do before going into work. Like, for example, my husband really prioritizes working out before work because that can be really helpful with stress management, or things that you do after work. How can you pour back into yourself in a big or small way? What comes to mind is I saw this video series of this girl who she decided, I think it's like either every day after work or a few days after work, she prioritizes doing something new, like going out and not letting her job sort of like siphon all of her energy. And she came to find that even though initially it felt like this extra work of like, oh my gosh, I'm going home and now I'm going to go back out, she ended up going and doing hobbies and having social interactions that ended up filling her cup, ended up leaving her feeling more energized or optimistic or happy or seen. And that helped her not feel as drained at work. So that's what's coming to mind for me. And for you guys, my Leo friends, I'm wishing you a beautiful full moon. Now for my Virgo friends, this Taurus full moon will be happening in your 9th house. And this is really signifying this sort of dichotomy between expansion meets embodiment. So what does it look like for you to learn, have downloads, have realizations, maybe deepen or strengthen or ground your spiritual pursuits or your higher learning pursuits or your research on maybe long distance travel or a trip that you took? What does it look like for you to learn or grow or make connections or realize certain things? Or maybe you've saved screenshots of insights, or maybe you've downloaded videos of things that are like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Like, I really need to implement this in my life. What does it look like for you to actually pause, write down those lessons or get clear on what they are, and actually decide how you're going to actually integrate those lessons into your life? And I say this because the 9th house is all about higher learning and your relationship with your spirituality, with religion, with philosophical or moral views, and your studies, your deep learning. And with this being a Taurus full moon, signifying a sort of culmination in this area of your life, and with it being in Taurus, this earth sign that's fixed, it's the signification of what does it look like to ground any sort of insights or experiences or lessons that you've had? What does it look like to actually put it to practice in a tangible way so that it's actually integrated into your life and it helps you actually evolve as a human being? So a few days leading up to or following this lunation, you might have an experience that has to do with something that you maybe have been studying or spiritually exploring that may reach a turning point for you. That could signify, like this connection that you've been looking for. It can be a really great time to let go of any sort of rigid philosophies or anything that you feel like maybe you've learned something new or you're realizing something, but there's something, maybe it's conscious or subconscious, that's been holding you back. What comes to mind is, For some people who've deconstructed from previous religions, oftentimes they were born into it or raised in it, and they realized they want to take on a different religion or a different spiritual path, or they want to keep that spiritual path, but they realize the way in which they were doing it or they were taught to do it isn't aligned with the new things that they're learning, or they just are evolving in some way. Even outside of spirituality, maybe you learned something for a long time in school and now you're in higher learning, or you're doing secondary learning or something like that, and you're realizing, oh, it's kind of this other way. There can sometimes be a bit of shame or deeper rooted feelings of like, oh, but I don't want to let down these people, or, oh, like, I was taught for so long to be shameful of this thing that now I consciously know and I'm learning is not shameful, but there's still this something back there. This can be a really great time for integrating these things, but also kind of like looking under the rug where maybe you've been sweeping the uncomfy feelings and actually facing them and looking at them for the better and releasing those things. Hopefully I'll get what I'm trying to explain to you, but that is my reading for you, my Virgo friends. Now for my Libra friends, this Taurus full moon will be happening in your 8th house of inheritance. The 8th house is the house of other people's money, of contracts, of negotiation. The 8th house is also, it's generally speaking, it's the house of deeper rooted emotions, the sort of deeper, more intimate emotions that come from longer term relationships. Think of, in a platonic way, maybe you have a business partnership and you've been working with somebody for a long time, and certain things pop up that require a certain level of vulnerability or uncomfortable conversations to have a deeper level of trust through intimacy, through being like, hey, let's talk about this. Okay, you know what? You know those people who it's like they've been working with each other for a long time and they kind of like know each other's, not skeletons, but it's like they've been through so much together that it's like, we see each other for who we are, and like, it's not perfect, but it's like we've been through so much together and we trust each other. Think of long-term relationships. Anyway, all of that to say, this, and with, Libra, you're already ruled by Venus. Taurus, Venus is in, or not Venus, this full moon is in the sign of Taurus, ruled by Venus. Venus is in your sign of Libra right now. This lunation can really bring up potential experiences that have to do with those Venus-ruled themes of shared resources, intimacy, and trust, a few days leading up to it, a few days following it. And this can be both where it's flourishing and maybe where you feel a little bit of stagnation when it comes to those things. But either way, this can be a really powerful time to release any old patterns of maybe dependency, codependency, or fear of vulnerability, and let truth bring healing. And for many of us, that can be really scary. And that's why journaling on your own, processing these things, asking yourself, where is this coming from and how can I maybe approach this differently? Or why do I feel an aversion to diving deeper into this or figuring this out with this person, or just asking clarifying questions, like asking yourself, where does that come from? And whether or not that's conducive with the life and the type of relationships you want to have, And ultimately, if it isn't conducive to that, if you feel like any sort of fear of working through things is holding you back, then it sounds like that's something to maybe pay attention to if it's hindering your life or holding you back in some way. But that's just for some of you guys. I do want to spotlight that, again, like we have a benefic Venus interacting very well with this full moon in Taurus. And so this can actually be a signification of a very stabilizing time that can actually spotlight where there's a lot of stability in your life. This can be a really great time to practice gratitude and spotlight and celebrate how far you've come in your more intimate relationships, your more long-term relationships, your business relationships, your contracts. If you have any contracts coming up, if you have anything like that going on, it wouldn't hurt to double check those things, but also understand that this is a really great time to reflect on, is this going to bring stability to my life, or is this creating instability or stagnation? But that's my reading for you. Moving on to my Scorpio friends. Ooh, my phone is dying. I have my notes on here. Sorry, y'all. But moving on to my Scorpio friends, this lunation is happening in your 7th house of relationships, of equitability, of partnerships, of relationships of the heart. So a few days leading up to this full moon or a few days following it, you might notice certain dynamics that might have felt out of balance becoming more undeniable. There might be more of a spotlight on imbalances in your relationships. On the other side of the coin, there could be a spotlight on the stability in your relationships, and how you interact with them, especially with this being a more grounding full moon in the fixed earth sign of Taurus, ruled by Venus, which is in its domicile in Libra. There's a lot more expansive, lucky, and romantic energy that's actually very productive and constructive that you can work with right now, especially if you notice any sort of imbalance that you want to work on or release. And so now can be a really great time to, what comes to mind is, especially if you have anything that you want to work through, like write out, literally visualize, what would it look like if it worked out? How would it work out? You know, what would it feel? Maybe don't even think about the how, think about what you want to feel. And call that in. You know, this can be a really great time for those type of things. And again, it's a really great time to celebrate how far you've come in your relationships as well. You know, what has and hasn't been working for you, so to speak, in that realm. You also might be learning around this time to grow love in reciprocity instead of power dynamics. You know, shifting from, maybe you've had experience in the past where you look at interactions and relationships from a lens of power dynamics versus equal reciprocity. And, oh my gosh, they did this nice thing, you know, let me go do a nice thing for them, and take steps forward with an open mind and an open heart. And maybe if you're like, open heart, that is way too vulnerable. I can't trust. Working on what it can look like to get to that point, you know. But that is my reading for you, my Scorpio friends. Now for my Sagittarius rising friends, or my Sagittarius friends in general, this will be happening in this Taurus full moon will be happening in your 6th house, which is all about labor, the energy and work and labor that you give and receive from others. And the 6th house is also the house of the body and your personal health. In traditional astrology, it's not seen as like the most, like sort of positive house when it comes to like your personal health, but the 6th house is in general also the house of your personal health. So this can also signify a culmination point, a sort of cosmic spotlight on the state of your health, as it pertains to the labor that you give to others and receive from others. And with this being a Taurus full moon, it's definitely signifying a really great time for reflecting on your work-life balance. And I don't mean work-life balance as in like your professional job. Think about the work that you do inside of your own house. Okay. Are you the one who cooks and cleans and coordinates and plans or anything like that? Or maybe somebody else is, and they're doing a lot of work, and you're kind of realizing this full moon is spotlighting like, maybe I could help them. These are the sort of dynamics that will be coming up for you, my Sagittarius friends, a few days leading up to the day of and following this Taurus full moon. And this can be a really great time to reflect on what leaves you feeling grounded before or after work, what leaves you feeling a little bit more balanced. What can you do? How can you maybe communicate boundaries or explore different approaches to things or different dynamics that can leave everybody feeling like things are a little bit more equitable? Now, again, I do want to spotlight that this could show up in your life as you realizing, oh my goodness, this other person is doing so much work. Like, you know what, let me go and help them. This could actually be a signification of a time where you actually go out and you volunteer and you feel called to do that. And there's this sort of like shift in your perspective in your relationship with labor as it pertains to volunteering and giving to others. But those are the overarching themes for you, my Sagittarius friends. And if you want to journal, really journal and reflect on, again, work-life balance and what it can look like, big or small steps to create that balance when it comes to labor, the energy you give and receive. Think about the people who you hire as well for things. And also, as it pertains to your health, this full moon in Taurus can also be a great time to reflect on what is nourishing you nutritionally as well. Like literally, like what are you consuming as well? Now, for my Capricorn friends, this Taurus full moon will be happening in your 5th house of creativity, what sparks wonder and curiosity and inspiration. What are the things and experiences you've had in life, whether maybe it was like the last time I had this experience was in childhood, or recently, that left you feeling inspired. And with this being in the sign of Taurus, this is really signifying you might have some experiences leading up to or following this lunation where there could be some opportunities for you to potentially find more consistency in how often you have that experience of wonder, curiosity, and inspiration. What comes to mind is like, is there any sort of creative outlet that you have? Not everybody has to have a creative outlet. I don't know. Some people feel really grounded and feel really centered after they go run, after they play sports. It doesn't have to be necessarily like painting or singing or drawing or writing, but if it is, now's the time to circle back to that and kind of get clear on what your relationship is with it, because this full moon is really in your more creative and romantic zone in the 5th house. This is expression, joy, and desire, but also releasing of any pressure to perform or please. This can be a spotlight on, what comes to mind is anybody who has ever had a hobby or something that really interested them and they wanted to monetize it or like put it on social media or something. And then, or like maybe you really love baking and then somebody's like, oh, can you bake this for me? Can you bake that for me? And you realize, oh my gosh, I'm doing so much for others that now I don't have a strong association with this thing that used to be my outlet. I don't have a strong association with it actually being an outlet anymore. These are the type of things that could come up for you that help sort of spotlight for you, like, oh, let me get back to that sort of like childlike wonder and that personal relationship that I have with it. But again, full moons are about culmination for good, for better, for worse. This could be a time where you're realizing how far you've come when it comes to your creative expression. And you could have some experiences that really spot like, wow, I've really grown in this space. And it's really important to celebrate those things. So it could happen those are some of the things that could pop up. Now for my Aquarius friends, this Taurus full moon will be happening in your 4th house of your roots, the things that you have experienced in your past that have made you who you are today. So the 4th house is often, for that reason, associated with your home life, your family, and your emotional foundations. Think about the experiences that, for better or worse, that helped you become who you are today. So this can really signify for you, my Aquarius friends, a chapter in your living situation or family dynamic, or maybe even inner sort of stability, where things are being spotlighted for you as it pertains to those things. You might get some news from a family member, or you might feel a little bit more nostalgic, or something could shift in your home life in some way. Again, going back to your roots and what makes you feel grounded. That can spotlight either how far you've come in terms of growing from your past or evolving with your past. Or on the other side of the coin, it could spotlight maybe something that has been holding you back or creating stagnation, or there's been this stubbornness of not wanting to let go of something. But either way, these spotlights will definitely help to inform if you want to release anything around the time of this full moon to make yourself feel a little bit more aligned with the intentions that you have for yourself in terms of your growth in the context of your past. Like what comes to mind, this is kind of a little bit random, but not really, because it involves 4th house themes. Recently, I was thinking about how like when I was younger, I was the type of kid who would like introduce myself to a teacher in like 1st grade or 2nd grade, or even like, I think even kindergarten. And I was like, hi, my name is Alina and I like this, and I'm going to be and I'm going to be in your class. And this is my friend. This is her name. And like, just being very like, as a matter of fact, And I think back to that and I think about how I want to honor that child within me and remember that sort of power that I have within myself to be very like confident and a matter of fact and really like grounded in my energy, and get back to that, because there were points in my life where I was so worried about other people's approval that I was shrinking myself, shrinking, shape-shifting to be approved by someone I assumed would approve of me if I changed in this way. You know what I mean? And I'm getting back to my roots, and these things from my past are coming back to the forefront of my mind for a reason, to help me in growing. And so that's just an example for a bit of context. So if you want to journal or reflect or release something or maybe celebrate something, allow it to be something that involves things being tied back to your home life, your roots, your emotional foundations, family dynamics, or even your living situation. My Aquarius friends. Last but not least, my Pisces friends, what it do? This Pisces lunation, I'm a Pisces rising, so I love giving y'all your readings. This full moon in Taurus will be happening in your third house of conversation, information exchange. Think about the internet as well, learning. Think about fun facts and also short-term travel, the more immediate people in your vicinity. So think about your neighbors or people you live with, think of like the more immediate. So but the sort of foundational theme of the third house is definitely like conversation and information, communication, or lack thereof, maybe miscommunication. Your learning, your mindset, very cerebral. Third house is very much a very mercurial house. And so all that to say, you may get a bit more clarity a few days leading up to or a few days following this lunation on a project, a conversation, or a mental pattern that's been sort of like looping in your life. I'm looking down at my notes where this full moon might be illuminating for you. There could be a spotlight on like, oh, that's where I've had this mindset or I had this expectation of how things would play out. And I'm kind of realizing in this more analytical way, I'm realizing that if I kind of change my perspective this way, or, oh, I had this really a good conversation with somebody that really highlighted this thing for me. And there can be experiences that kind of expand your awareness or spark new ideas for you. There could be something that you might learn, but it can be helpful for some of you to let go of any sort of noisy input, constantly taking in information through like social media or like on your phone, and choosing words that are more grounding and not scattered, choosing activities and experiences and forms of information intake that are more grounding and not scattering. Whether that be, I'm going to finally just read this book. I'm going to, I'm going to go for a walk and listen to a podcast versus constantly scrolling. Like, how can you move away from scattered learning or insights or, ideas, and maybe take a few of them actually and ground them? What comes to mind, one, is maybe you've gotten a lot of really great ideas online or on your phone, and maybe you've taken screenshots of them or you've saved them in your notes app and you're like, well, I'm going to dive deeper into that. Around the time of this full moon, it can be really, really helpful to actually choose one or two of those things and actually ground them, that full moon Taurus theme, into something tangible in your life. Like actually do a deeper dive into that information or call someone and ask them follow-up questions about something. Something else that comes to mind that's very on brand with a third house full moon transit in your chart is I recently got to hang out with a friend of mine that I hadn't really hung out that much with. And we had a pretty long drive. And in that drive, we had such a great conversation about our outlook on life and on the future of our country and the world and our part that we played in it. And I'm going to be completely like sort of transparent, I guess, because I don't really talk about stuff like this, but I've been feeling really pessimistic and down and discouraged in a lot of ways. And this person was giving me like really valid reasons and sharing their really illuminating perspective on why we should be very optimistic and how there's so much power in optimism, and telling me like these really tangible references to things that are happening in the world that actually could lead to notable change for the betterment of society and for our neighbors. And anyway, but that was an example of third house conversation, information exchange that sort of shifts perspective or expands perspective, or that kind of spotlights how we can grow. And anyway, that's my reading for you, my Pisces friends. If you want to sort of lean into these more Taurus full moon themes of being grounded or releasing anything that's sort of scattering your energy, definitely a focus on what is scattering your literal attention span. What's scattering your focus on your day-to-day life, and how can you sort of ground that focus, because there's a lot of beautiful insights that can come through that for you. All right, y'all, let's go ahead and get into these full moon journal prompts. If you have your Auraline astrology planner, you can flip on over to the dedicated full moon journaling spread, and let's just get into these journal prompts. So the first one is, where are you potentially holding on to something out of a fear of loss, a fear of missing out, rather than genuine value? So again, where are you maybe holding on to something out of fear of loss, fear of missing out, rather than genuine value? Next question, What would stability look like if it were rooted in trust rather than control? And also, what does trust rather than control look like for you? What comes up in mind? And finally, is there anything that you feel called to either celebrate or release under this Taurus full moon? What's something that maybe you're proud of in a different way? All right, y'all, that concludes these journal prompts. I want to remind you to sign up for the Align newsletter if you haven't already to get this video in email form. I want to remind you that you can now see beautiful pictures of the Amethyst Spiral Planners. Onyx planners are once anything, but so that there's that. Also, if you want to see a flip through of the R-Line planner, see actually what is inside, I dare you to go watch that flip through video and tell me that you are not impressed, okay? I have been making these planners for over 5 years now, every single year adding new details and iterations and transits that are being tracked for you, retrogrades, eclipses, and I'm very proud of that. And finally, if you want to buy in bulk, if you want to buy the planners wholesale for your shop or maybe as a gift to your office, maybe your job or your business has a budget to gift people things, you can actually buy these planners in bulk at a very, 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 very steep discount, over 50% off retail value. And what was I going to say? Oh, I'm going to leave you with my favorite quote, and that is, be gentle with yourself, because life is about the journey, not the destination. All right.